friends, welcome to Active Self-Protection Extra. Today on John's Briefs with defense attorney and judge pro tem and prosecuting attorney and all the other things, Tim Forshee from Tim Forshee Law. I'm going to jump him today, and you know that I do this from time to time. I like to take an attorney, give him no time to prepare for anything, but he set himself up for this one on last week's video, and we're filming this one right after that one. So I want to talk to him about his experience as a judge with sovereign citizens. To win the fight after the fight, you need help. After a use of force, I trust Firearms Legal Protection to help me win the fight for the rest of my life. From their 24/7 attorney-answered hotline to coverage for the use of all legal tools, Firearms Legal Protection has you covered. Get a discount by signing up at the link below. So Tim, we see this, and I love nothing more than videos that I get to watch on YouTube of sovereign citizens getting tased. It's one of the most funny things I've ever seen in my life, right? And you know, if you go, if you're not familiar with this, I would encourage you on YouTube, Google P.Barnes, and you will see goofy sovereign citizens talking about admiralty law, and they're not a person, they're a human, and they don't wish to create joinder and all this other goofiness. But I've seen kind of like snippets of those in real life, but you've actually dealt with them.
Yes, I dealt with them, I believe, as a judge. I think I remember distinctly twice. And then interestingly, about maybe a month or two ago, I was representing my client in a misdemeanor case in Glendale City Court. And not to use names, but the judge is actually a family friend. So we revealed that to the prosecution, made sure there was no conflict of interest, so we could proceed. And she had to deal with it. And it was a guy, the case immediately before my case.
Oh boy.
And he stood up and dealt with it. And literally it got to the point where the prosecutor is kind of a young guy and just, probably 2 years out of law school and wasn't kind of dialed in. And I kind of sauntered over behind the defendant and sat down next to the prosecutor and kind of leaned over. And the guy was big and he was starting to threaten violence and get really a little bit crazy.
Oh boy.
And there wasn't a cop in the courtroom yet. There was one on his way. And I had a couple of these big stout pens and I just slid one over to him. And it turned out later he told me he was actually a former Marine, so he wasn't as helpless as I feared.
All right.
But I'll tell you what, he took that pen, he took the cap off and he held it like this.
Yeah, right, all right.
Because we were both like, we didn't know what the heck was going to happen. This guy, of course, you're unarmed in a courtroom. But yeah, I've had guys where they refused to give ID.
Unless you're the judge, right?
We're not going to answer that question. I always tell people if you walk in the front of the courthouse, you're going to be disarmed. If you walk in the back, it's nobody's damn business.
Okay, you see? Okay.
But the simple fact is that they refuse to recognize the validity of the government. They refuse to recognize the jurisdiction of the court. They won't provide an ID. They won't provide a name. So you'll call State versus Miller, and he won't even stand up.
Oh, boy.
And then finally he'll stand up and he'll say, my name is X13. I don't recognize the name Miller. That's a slave name. I've heard one of the guys say that. Yeah. And
that's my government name.
And they just take it right from there. Yeah, I don't recognize the sovereign. I don't recognize the jurisdiction of this court. I'm a sovereign citizen.
Walking
you have no jurisdiction over me. And it's like, and you just want to say, dude, I totally get where you're coming from. And if you calm down, I'll bet it'd be a fun cup of coffee for both of us.
But by the time they get to criminal
you're about to get tased. Yeah, it's like there's a cop walking towards you with his hand on his taser, with his hand on his pepper spray. This is not going to end well, And they just don't have the common sense to know when to stop pushing. And it always, both times for me, the cops came in the courtroom and they took the guy into custody once on the floor. And it's just like, what are you hoping to accomplish here? And I would like to say that they were smart enough and devious enough that they were hoping to set up somebody for a civil suit or something like that. They weren't.
No,
there was no savvy there at all. It was just they looked at some conspiracy thing on the internet and they decided to make it cool.
And I feel like it seems to me that they're magicians is what they really are, and because they feel like they have magic words, they know a spell
exactly,
and so
they'll sometimes read it.
Yeah,
like somebody on the internet's put it on there and they read it and it's gospel.
It's like they've read too much Harry Potter and it's expecto patronum and they expect their Patronus to show up to protect them from the system.
Well, the Patronus does show up, but he's wearing a blue outfit and he's got a taser in his hand. So
it's not
be careful.
The Patronus you wanted. And so like, your flag is fringed and so it's an admiralty law and I don't fall under that jurisdiction and all these things. And I just remind folks, listen, magic words don't get you out of trouble. No different than I think there used to be, and sometimes it's still around, the magic words of I was in fear for my life.
Right.
It's not a magic formula. It doesn't get you out of trouble unless that comports with the facts.
Correct.
And if it comports with the facts, great. I kind of lament, well, not kind of, I really lament in our communities now that there's this polarization of people, and we see these folks that drive all the way to the edge.
Yeah.
And that's where we find these kind of sovereign citizen folks.
And both edges is what the media is reporting. So we all think that that's all that's happening is this craziness on the fringes out there. So yeah, it's a problem for sure.
And so listen, a couple things. For all of you Google lawyers, first of all, Google is not a law degree, okay? And you can get smart. You can learn a lot.
That's right.
Right?
You can also learn a lot of the wrong things.
Yeah, well, and I mean, how many times have I said people think laws are written in English? They're not. They're written in lawyer. Lawyer is a different language than English. They use the same words, but they do not mean the same thing.
We just know that they don't mean anything.
Well,
Yeah, right.
and so, you know, again, lawyer is different than English. It's a dialect of English, and if you don't understand the dialect, you don't get that. Number two, just because you read somebody say something on the internet, don't make it true.
Yeah.
And especially in a court of law.
Yeah, because a judge is they are not allowed to put up with that. It's going to go this way. I'm going to call my cases this way. If you don't like that, shut up and sit down.
And if you want to see how this actually goes in real court, we just had a major case a couple of weeks ago that finally came to fruition with Darrell Brooks. And, you know, he drove his car through a whole bunch of people with terrible evil that he did, and represented himself and went full sovereign citizen, like, you know, all the things.
Yeah.
And the judge had him removed from the court a bunch of times, made him go sit in a courtroom next door and participate by video, and muted his mic most of the time because he was such a complete disruption of the proceedings. And guess what? At the end of things, the jury went, that guy's a moron, and they threw the book at him.
Yeah, which kind of was a foregone conclusion, which I think was
What he
one of the
did was
reasons-
egregious.
Well, because the judge can refuse to allow you to represent yourself. That happened in the Manson case, you know. The judge could refuse that, but I think it's one of these things where it's like, it's just such a foregone conclusion. There's so much evidence. It's a capital case times like 12. I think there were like, 12 fatalities, weren't there? It's just, we know which direction that thing's going to go. Now it's just theater at some point. I mean, we all...
This
don't get me
isn't
wrong,
the error that will make it happen.
Exactly. I'm not trying to make it sound as though due process is some foregone conclusion that we can just skip once in a while. But it wasn't going to really affect the outcome. I guess that's kind of the point. If he'd had the best lawyer in the world or no lawyer at all, I think the train was headed down the same track. So.
By that point, of course, the judge and both sides have had discovery, seen what's coming and what's to come, and the judge is like, this is not the error that will give him an appeal.
Correct. Well, and don't forget, it's probably a capital case, which means there's going to be years of appeals no matter what.
No matter
what. So, and here's one good bit of good news. One of the most popular appeals is ineffective assistance of counsel. Well, if you represent yourself, you've lost that argument.
You've lost that argument.
So that's good.
So, sovereign citizens, goodness sakes, you heard it. They end up tased and in cuffs.
They lose every time. I mean, they just simply do. Yeah.
So please, listen, I'm a wackadoodle libertarian, okay? I'm a leave me alone guy, and I'll leave you alone guy. I'm sure if I started talking about my politics, you'd be mad at me about something,
right.
Okay? But when you get to those extreme fringes, you ain't gonna get it, and it's not gonna help you, and you're gonna end up tased, bro.
And you drove on a governmental street to get here, and you're enjoying the defense of the United States Armed Forces. I mean, you can't pick and choose. You're either part of the system or you're not. If you're not part of the system, go join Ted Kaczynski in a cabin and shut up.
There you go.
I don't know.